Welcome to the first day of the Blair Sew Along. If you've not already assembled your pattern and cut out your fabric, go ahead and go back and do that because we are going to be jumping straight in with step 1 today. So just so you know, I'm going to be sewing up view A, which is the mini skirt. I will also be doing the patch pockets and the belt so that I go over all of the instructions, but no matter what length you're sewing, the instructions are going to be the same for this sew along. One other thing just to keep in mind is that the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch for this pattern. There will be a couple places where it's different, but I will let you know. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to transfer all of our markings from our pattern pieces over to our fabric. So we can do this in a few different ways. Now first of all, the notches and the tops of the dart legs, I like to just do that with a simple little 1/4 inch snip. Now keep in mind that your seam allowance once again is a 1/2 inch, so make sure that is a small snip so you're not snipping into past your seam line. Now for the rest of your markings, there's different ways you can do this, but I usually just transfer these with pins, so I can put that little pin, for instance, in the point of my dart here. And then if I pull on the paper gently, it will just kind of like poke through, and then those pins stay in my fabric. And then my favorite marking tool for sewing is actually an ultra washable Crayola marker. I just find that they work really well and they wash out of my fabric. So I usually choose a color that's close to my fabric, and I'm able to use that marker to then transfer all of those markings at all of those pin locations. And then I also use my ruler, of course, to connect where needed. You also want to be aware of which markings go on the right side of your fabric and which go on the wrong side. So these pocket placement markings are going to go on the right side of your fabric. You'll also do the buttonholes on the right side of the fabric, but then like your dart legs, for instance, are going to go on the wrong side of the fabric since you sew those from the wrong side. And if you are sewing up those optional pockets, don't forget the buttonholes on your pocket flaps and then also the dot markings on your main pocket pieces. The buttonholes will be on the right side of the fabric, but then those dot markings on your main pocket pieces will be on the wrong side. Okay, now that all of our markings are all transferred, it's going to be time to go ahead and fuse our fusible interfacing to the wrong side of the pattern pieces that need the fusible. We'll start here with the pocket flap lining. These are going to be placed a 1/2 inch in from the bottom and the side edges, but then it'll be flush with the top edge. Next up is going to be the waistband lining, and this one is going to be centered, so there's going to be a 1/2 inch seam allowance around all of the edges. Next, we're going to apply fusible to the button band pieces. You need to keep in mind what side has the notches. And then the next thing that we want to do is we need to figure out where the middle of your button band is. So I find it easiest to just fold it in half with wrong sides touching, and that will go ahead and give you that center line. And then you're going to take your interfacing piece, and one side of it is going to align with that center line, and then the other side is going to be a 1/2 inch in from the notched edge. So make sure, once again, that you are sure which side of your button band has the notches and which one does not. And then there's also going to be a 1/2 inch on the top and the bottom. Okay, and the one last thing that we are going to interface is the belt. The belt is obviously optional, but if you are doing it, you want to go ahead and put the interfacing on. It is going to be centered so that there is a 1/2 inch around all of the sides. Okay, now that we have all of that prep work, we finally get to start sewing. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to protect that waistband edge by stay stitching the top of both the fronts and the back. Now this is really important. A lot of people skip this. but I just really urge you not to. The reason why is because if it stretches out even a little bit, your waistband pattern piece will no longer fit. And this often happens the first time that you try it on to check fit. So just do yourself a favor and go ahead and stay stitch the top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So just slightly inside the normal 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that your skirt pieces are stay stitched, we can go ahead and start sewing. So what we need to do today, it's actually our last step for today, is we are going to go ahead and sew the darts on both the front and the back. Now the way that I like to do this is I like to fold my skirt in half along those dart legs with right sides touching, and then I line up those two dart legs at the very top, and then I also make sure that the apex or the point of my dart is on the fold, and then I use a pin and I check both sides just to make sure that those dart legs are lined up all the way down. So I carefully do this to all 4 of those darts before I go over and start sewing. Now the way that I like to sew my darts is I like to start at the very top in a normal stitch length of 2.5 millimeters. I back stitch and I continue stitching down till I'm about like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch from the dart point. And then I reduce my stitch length down to 1 millimeter. So it's a really nice tight stitch there. And then I don't back stitch at the end. Instead, I stitch all the way off the end of my dart, leave long thread tails, and then you're gonna hand knot the very end there. Now the last thing that we need to do is we just need to press those darts. So I like to use a tailor's ham because of the curved nature of a dart. You can also use a rolled up towel. Now you are going to press the excess of that dart towards the center front or the center back. And once you have done that for all 4 of your darts, you are finished for today. So tomorrow we are going to be tackling the pockets. If you're not doing the optional pockets, you can skip tomorrow and come back on day 3 of the sew along.